I'm on the train, the London Underground, and it's 6:45 p.m. I'm on my way home from spending the entire day at work. I'd left the house that morning at 6 a.m, so I was almost out for 13 hours. And I was thinking about how good it would feel to get home and finally have my 1 hour of fun before I had to go to bed and repeat all of it again. But then I hear the dreaded message. This train will be terminating due to a signal failure, and my excitement immediately fades away because I knew what that message meant. It meant I wasn't getting home anytime soon. So I get off at the next station, annoyed because I knew I had to get that other line and everyone was going to be on it, packed like sardines, and I hated being so packed in a train. But then it gets even worse because I realised that the entire station is closed. I look up if there's any stations in walking distance, and there isn't. So that means my only other option is to get a bus. So get a bus I did, and instead of 30 more minutes to get home, it took over 2 hours. And just after 9 p.m, I finally get home. And that was 15 hours after I had first left my house in the morning. And now, in order to have my dinner and wash myself, I had to sacrifice that 1 hour of fun. That's all I had time for before I went to bed. So I did that, I went to bed, and I wish it ended there, but it didn't. Because my brain didn't want to accept that this was the day I had just lived. There was literally zero fun in my day, and my dopamine baseline was already so low from just being depressed working this job that I needed to do something. So I always went for my little crutch. Porn. So I indulge in that a little bit more, beating my meat, my little fat titties bouncing around, and now I know that I'm sacrificing my sleep for the next day, but at this point, honestly, I didn't care. On average, going to work and commuting there and back took me about 13 hours per day. If you say the average month has 21 work days and then you work it out, take away the train fees and stuff, I was left with about £950 per month. And if you then divide that by the commuting time spent working, I was doing all of that for £3.87 per hour. You're fucking worth so much more than that. After you start your own business, you can actually control your time and optimize your work in a way which will let you work far less hours, but get more work done. Working on my first business, the one that YouTube plaque comes from, nets me over £100 per hour. This particular channel isn't quite there yet, but we're building it up, we're getting there. At multiple points when I was building that channel, I managed to optimize my time so well that I was working 3-hour days and the business was still growing, it was still going well. Before I tell you how to do it, if you're new here, my name is Brian, and what I help you do is quit that shit 9-to-5 life that you know you're better than. If you resonate with that and you want to escape the rat race, you are like us. Everyone on this channel has either built or is building this better life for themselves, so welcome. Consider clicking the subscribe button. At the core of all of this is something that you've probably heard of if you've watched me before or if you've watched a lot of business content, and that is deep work. And there's a lot of concepts in that book, but I'm going to tell you all of the concepts that I personally use the most and that work the best for me. The first one is splitting your work up into blocks. I personally right now have 2-hour blocks in the morning, and after that, all of my work is done. When you're doing your blocks, focus on just one task at a time. If you start switching between tasks every time you switch, your brain needs a 5-minute adjustment period, and that time just ends up being wasted. So plan ahead, make sure you know which tasks you're going to be doing in the blocks. Set rules for this work, and the number one rule should always be 0 distractions, no phone. And another one that helps me a lot is to not look stuff up on the internet, because sometimes when you're doing your work, you might feel like you need this particular piece of information, but often that ends up wasting more time than it ends up saving. So if you are stuck on something, try and look for the answer in your mind first before you go off into the internet and look it up. One of the most important rules is to not do more than 4 hours per day. The book makes this very clear. If you're currently doing more than 4 hours of deep work, you're not doing deep work. A couple of years ago, I actually thought I was doing about 5 hours of work a day. I used to just block out between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. for it. But if I was being really honest with what I was doing during that work block, I was doing more like 2 hours of work a day. It was only when I realized that if I scheduled in less hours, it would force me to condense that into those hours, and I could actually be lazier, because I was really lazy at the time. I didn't want to work. So by scheduling in less hours, I'd get the same amount of work done and have more free time. And in your general life, to level up your deep work skill, there's 2 things you can do. The first thing is to embrace boredom. Just be bored in your everyday life. Don't take your phone out at every step step, because the same thing is going to happen when you're working. You're going to want to take your phone out. You might even do it without realizing, and all of a sudden you've wasted 20 minutes of your time. And the second thing you can do is only do one thing at a time. Stop taking shit and looking at your phone at the same time. That really helps as well, because it mimics that unilateral focus of the deep work that you're trying to do. Okay, so that concludes deep work. And the next ones aren't really deep work related. I don't think they're mentioned in the book, but they've also really helped me. And the first one is to be scrappy. 95% of the result can be achieved in 50% of the time. But the problem is, often, if someone's a perfectionist, which a lot of people actually are, they end up wasting 50% more time on getting that last 5% perfect, and you need to avoid that. I actually make this mistake a lot when I script out videos for this channel. My intention is to just have a list of bullet points, but often what I do is I just spend so much time on it, getting it perfect, that I end up almost writing out a word-for-word script, and I want to avoid that as much as possible. That's why this video is more bullet points. Writing it all out word for word takes my personality out of it as well, so I really need to be careful and stop doing it. And this is actually how I built my first product. I was being scrappy with it, and that product still took me 8 months to make. If I wasn't scrappy, if I tried to make everything perfect, it would have taken twice as long. And sure, now when I'm working on it, some things might take a little bit longer to change, but it was worth it, to be honest. I'm saving so much more time by just making the thing quickly in the first place. And I actually didn't realize how big of a role this played in the success of my other business until now. The next rule is to avoid looping in your mind. This is actually the biggest problem I had when I first started working deeply. When you're at work, your brain tries to conserve as much of your mental energy as possible. So you end up looping the same task in your mind. And you probably do this a lot in a 9 to 5. You're just looking at an email and you're thinking, should I do this word or that word? And what you need to do is to force your brain to make the next decision as quickly as possible. This is how you actually exhaust your brain and use your energy so that you won't be able to work more than 4 hours. Your task with deep work is to use up all of your focus and mental energy as quickly as possible. So whenever you find yourself looping, force your brain to make the next step, take that next leap. And when you start doing this, you might find that the amount of time you can spend doing deep work is actually a lot less than you thought. But the great thing is, now you get all of that work done in half of the time. Next thing is you need to use the value times scale equation. In the past, this was really hard to achieve, but now with social media, anyone can do it. The problem with a lot of 9 to 5s is that people go for high value, but they're only helping one person, their employer. And because of that, they need to work more and more hours to get more and more money. And that's not really a good way of doing it. Their value is capped at whatever their degree is. The majority of the population is missing the scale part of the equation, because a lot of people's value is actually quite high. And if they just improved the scale of it a little bit, their income would fucking explode. It's funny because I'm actually breaking this rule on this channel right now because I've always wanted to try and do mentorship. And I'm doing it right now. I've got a few people on, and if you want to be mentored by me one-to-one, then I'll leave a link in the description. The next important thing you have to do is to set concrete and very realistic tasks for your day. I used to have this problem because I used to set myself really big tasks because I thought, you know, I'm doing deep work. I could probably get quite a lot of work done. And those tasks were always just a little bit outside of my reach. So I never ended up getting them done fully. And the problem with that is I eventually stopped setting my tasks for the day altogether because I never got them done in the first place. And this made me a lot more likely to do the looping thing. And the last one is a bit of a weird one, and it's to have these explosion periods every 6 months where you do a lot more work than you usually do. A lot of entrepreneurs will say that they work 3 to 4 hours per day, and for their average day, that's true. But every 6 months to a year, they have a big launch coming up. Something's going to happen, and often they end up working 12 to 14 hour days. And what these explosion periods allow you to do is to still move the needle forward a lot faster than you otherwise would, but end up spending the most of your life still working those 3 to 4 hour days. That happened to me recently when I released the product on the other channel that I run, and I actually ended up spending about 10 to 14 hour days for the last month and a half, 2 month period, just to really get that product product perfect and make sure it was as good as it could possibly be. And then after it came out, I went straight back to working the usual 3 to 4 hours. You don't have to do this, but you'll find that if you're really invested in your work and you want to be successful, you actually won't have a problem with doing it. The problem with a 9 to 5 is that we spend so long just wasting time at work that we don't want to work in the first place. But you'll find that when you actually work a manageable amount every day, you're going to want to do these periods where you really move the needle forward, work a lot more than usual. And I'm excited for you because that's when the work will actually become fulfilling for you. Think about that. Work that actually fulfills you. I didn't know how that felt for such a long time. When I left my house at 6 a.m, depressed, just bored out of my mind all day, spending time reading through emails, reading through the company wiki, my entire day was basically meaningless. A side effect of pursuing your own business is it makes it so much more fulfilling for you because you have concrete goals that you set yourself and you can see your business slowly growing. And the cool thing is, after you optimize your workflow to only work 3 to 4 hours per day, if you really, really want to push forward, you can actually spend the rest of your day learning more skills, getting good at the particular skills that you find to be your constraint, to then make more money. This gives you a fucking massive advantage over everyone else. Everyone else that's in a job, because jobs are the old meta. Get out of a job whilst there's still space up here. There's people earning hundreds of thousands a month, and there's no reason that you should be any different. Whenever you get any doubts, just think. Don't think, why me? Think, why not me? Hearing that quote finally pushed me over the edge and got me started on this. So, I'm done. That's all of my tips for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I will see you in the next one.